Hello, Gene the OK Boomer here. Welcome to today's vlog. By now, can there be anybody in the country or perhaps in the whole world except for a dyed-in-the-wool, the most dyed-in-the-wool liberal or socialist or communist who doesn't understand that we have now, today, in the United States, the most radical left-wing presidential administration that we've ever had? And that brings me to today's subject, which is a woman I'm sure you've all heard of by now, or you should have if you haven't, Soleil Omarova, the nominee, the president's nominee for controller of the currency, which is a very, as you can imagine, very important position. And that's the nominee, and I don't understand how he could have nominated, how any American president could have nominated this woman for this position, or for any position, actually, unless there's a federal dog catcher, maybe, but or waitressing, maybe. But she graduated from Moscow University, which, by the way, is not necessarily a disqualifier, believe it or not. Now, I'm a conservative, always keep that in mind when you evaluate whatever I say, but I say that having been educated in a communist country is not necessarily a disqualifier, because of so many immigrants who come to this country from communist countries and other repressive regimes, who come here for our freedom, appreciate our freedom, and utterly disown the systems under which they were brought up. And they actually, having grown up in under those systems, they are very well qualified to explain, understand those systems, and to be especially resistant to having such systems instituted in our country. But Omarova is a different case entirely. She is still a total communist. If you've seen read any articles about her, heard her testimony, and I'm going to show you a video of her today, but she is so radical that it makes no sense to me that she would have been nominated, and I can't imagine her getting through the Senate, but you never know, because Democrats, unfortunately, except for Kirsten Sinema, Joe Manchin, thank God for those two who think independently, but usually this is one advantage that Democrats have over Republicans, is that Democrats will stick together and they will vote a party line, even if it costs them their own next election and they're thrown out of office. They will still hew to the party line, especially in the House. We'll see what happens. We have this reconciliation bill. Supposedly it's to be voted on this week. There are some moderates. There's a handful of, I think, 5 moderates, about 5, waiting for a CBO score, and they say they will not vote for this bill until they get the CBO score and know that that it's kosher, that the bill really is 1.75 trillion and is paid for, and yada, 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 which is not going to be the case, by the way. I'm confident in predicting that. But you never know. They could be bludgeoned into voting for it before the score comes. And then you have the Pramila Jayapal, the head of the Progressive Caucus, saying that the agreement was only to provide figures from the CBO, not the full final report. So we'll see what happens. But that concerns me, because it is possible that this woman will get through the Senate. I just want to share this one article of one of the things and show you a video of her actually saying these things, because it's so unbelievable that you really do need to see the video. But anyways, here's the headline. Biden pick for bank regulator, proposed Fed takeover banking, manipulate stock prices. I better read that again. Biden pick for bank regulator proposed Fed take over banking, manipulate stock prices. In Soleil Morova's world, America only really needs one bank, the Federal Reserve. Omarova, President Joe Biden's nominee to be one of the top banking regulators, has proposed such drastic expansion of government control over finance that it's leaving some experts scratching their heads over whether the administration is serious about her nomination. Let me just jump out for a second. I assure you, yes, they're serious, because the progressives, they love this kind of stuff, and they're running the administration. Biden is just a figurehead when he's even awake. And he's not in control. It's just, well, he just had this 3-hour conversation with China, with Xi Jinping, and just projected weakness all the way down the line. That's another vlog for another day. But anyways, back to this article, getting back to Omarova's beliefs, and not just beliefs, but actual proposals. It would be best, she outlined in a series of articles and papers, to virtually abolish private banking. Let me give you that again, to virtually abolish private banking. Every American would have a bank account set up at the Fed, and authorities would be free to inflate the currency by issuing interest on the deposits or even crediting the accounts directly. To counter inflation, get this, to counter inflation, the Fed could also slash interest rates, or even, if all else fails, take away people's money as needed, she proposed in a recent paper. However, yeah, I mean, what is she saying there? She's saying that you would, instead of having your own bank account at a bank, there would be no banks, you would have an account at the Federal Reserve. In other words, it would be a government account that the government would have control over. And if there was a recession, they would just give you interest on the money in your account, just out of nowhere, or print money and deposit it. That's what they would be doing: print money and deposit it into your account. But if it's the opposite problem, such as we have today, where we have inflation, which is the simple definition, too much money chasing too few goods, the government would reach into your government bank account, which is the only bank account you would be allowed to have, and take money out. Or they would slash the interest rates that they would pay on your deposits. But more important, they would just reach into your account and take money out of it so that you have less money, and therefore that fights inflation. That would be bad enough, but again, this is the most radical administration we've ever had. And unfortunately, getting back to the article, however, she didn't stop there. The Fed would build, get this, the Fed would build a stock portfolio mirroring the broader market and short stocks it perceives as inflated in value, or, quote, go long, unquote, meaning buy those it sees as undervalued. The government also would be given special voting rights as though it were a major shareholder in every publicly traded company, directly influencing the appointment and firing of executives. According to several experts, According to several experts, the implications of the first proposal alone, the centralization of banking, are so enormous they would effectively enable the government to run the economy with near unlimited discretion, which is socialism. All your money would be in the hands of the government, and they would control the entire economy, which is what's in this the penultimate paragraph that I just read to you. Let me go back over this in case you didn't get it. So the Fed would have a portfolio of stocks that would mirror the broader market. So could be the Russell 4000, but we'll stick with say the S&P 500. So they would have a basket of stocks, all the stocks that are in the S&P 500. And if the government would decide, no longer would the market decide on the value of stocks from buying and selling and deciding what stocks you want to have, which ones you want to sell. but the government would decide if a stock, they would say, let's say a green energy stock, right, Green New Deal stock was undervalued, the government would come in with your tax dollars or money that they seize from your account, remember that earlier paragraph, and go out and buy the stocks to pump up the price. Or if they saw the other one, say an oil company, and they say they want to, well, she said that in an earlier video, I'm not going to play it today, but she said it would be necessary to put a lot of the smaller energy companies, oil companies, out of business in order to fight climate change. So imagine that this system that she envisions actually existed. So then oil, well, that's what she could just drive. The government would short these oil companies' stocks and drive down the price and make everybody who owns any stocks in those companies poorer. Not because of the market. I mean, you buy a stock and you take your chances, but by government manipulation. I mean, it is really, oh, and I forgot the other part here. The government would also be given special voting rights as though it were a major shareholder. So you'd have the government basically on the boards of every public company, every corporation, and well, imagine the government having a seat on the, we'll say, General Motors board, right? Or any company, or Microsoft's board. And they would say, well, you're not paying your workers enough, or they don't have enough rights, or they don't have enough control of what goes on. We want the workers to decide, the employees, and never mind the CEO. And, well, you can see what would happen. And it says special voting rights. What does that mean? That would mean your voting rights come from your share of the stocks. The more shares you buy, the more voting rights. So either the government would buy a majority stake in, say, General Motors, and then be able to dictate what happens in General Motors and who is on the board, or just through legislation, and just say, okay, well, if every corporation of a certain size, the government gets 5,000 votes or something, and whatever the number would be, you can. This is so crazy that well, according to several experts, the implications of just the first proposal, the centralization of banking, getting rid of private banking accounts, are so enormous they would effectively enable the government to run the economy with near unlimited discretion. But you see, that's only that one thing, but look how much other additional elements they are. As I said, it's so crazy. And what presidential administration in a democracy or republic such as ours would even propose such a nominee? I mean, I can't even believe that liberals would do this, to be honest. I cannot even believe that Bernie Sanders would do this. But apparently, as occasionally happens, very rarely, I'm wrong. But enough of me talking. I wouldn't be surprised at all if you were just shaking your head and saying, Gene is making this all up. This can't possibly be happening. So here's a video. I promised you a video. Here it is.
The idea behind this paper is to try to re-envision, redesign the financial system that we have today in order to connect it more directly to the macroeconomy and make that connection more effective and equitable for everyone. And the purpose behind it, of course, ultimately is to change the public-private power balance in finance, to democratize it on a more systemic level. So the central bank balance sheet, like the Fed's balance sheet, is the crucial lever in this respect, because that is a ledger that effectively mirrors how the economy is being financed. So Lev already walked us through the sort of fundamental notion of the financial system as a public-private franchise arrangement for outsourcing sovereign money creation to privately owned bank. And the one wrinkle that I would like to add to that is that the banks create private deposit money when they extend loans. In other words, that function of money creation is intricately connected to the outsourced function of credit allocation, right? And that's the ultimate source of banks' special power, and that's sort of together makes banks kind of the privileged franchisees of the Fed. So the Fed's balance sheet right now looks like a typical franchisor ledger. In other words, the Fed has absolutely no direct relationship with real economy actors, with regular people like us, or even with corporations that are not banks, not financial institutions. The Fed's liabilities consist of cash, but mostly they consist of bank reserve accounts, which is basically special deposit accounts that are available only to banks. And the assets are primarily US government debt, which means that basically the Fed is channeling its resources into to actors that engage in conducting fiscal policy, and assets that the Fed purchases as a result of rescue efforts, discount window bailouts, and so on and so forth. And we all know the problems with this setup, with this kind of a ledger that the central bank is running today. There are a lot of inefficiencies. For example, whenever there is a need to inject greater amount of credit into the real economy, all the Fed can do is sort of indirectly use its levers to induce private banks to increase their lending, but it ultimately cannot force them to do so. So the idea behind the concept of the people's ledger is to change that narrow specialization of the Fed from being just a franchisor that has a direct relationship only with the privileged franchisee banks, to make it a central bank for the economy, for the people, basically to establish the central bank's, the Fed's balance sheet as the ledger that shows how the Fed sits in the center of the real economy, of the American economy, and basically channels the financial resources in the most effective, most efficient, and most public interest-oriented way. And that means redesigning both the asset side and the liability side of the Federal Reserve. So on the liability side, that means that instead of kind of outsourcing money creation to private banks, the Fed as the central bank would directly engage in money creation. And that's sort of a more familiar concept that we already know. There is a lot of conversation about the so-called CBDC, central bank digital currency, which is essentially, it can be along those lines of kind of more direct money creation. And also the more recently popular idea of Fed accounts, the term coined by Lev here and Morgan Riggs, his co-author back in 2018. So that's sort of, that's where my paper is kind of taking off and kind of trying to run with that ball and see how we can push the idea of creating Fed accounts, digital dollar deposit accounts that would be universally available to everybody at the Fed, to kind of push it a little bit to the limit and to imagine what would it be like if instead of being just a public option for deposit banking, this would be actually the full transition. In other words, there will be no more private bank deposit accounts, and all of the deposit accounts will be held directly at the Fed.
That's it for today. Thanks as always for stopping by. I appreciate the time you spend with me. If you have any comments, questions, suggestions for future topics, you can put them in the comment section below the video. You could subscribe. I love getting new subscribers. Share this video with anybody you think would also like it. But most of all, come back and see me again. I would love to see all of you again. And until I do see all of you again, bye.